right, this is just the last little bit of our Algebra Honors Unit 6 study guide. So these last questions, we're just going to rationalize the denominator, and that means that we want to make sure that we don't have a fraction inside our radical, and also if we have a fraction as our answer, we don't want to have a radical in the denominator. So I'm going to always double check and make sure I'm doing square roots or cube roots. I just want to make sure I know what I'm looking at. So all three of these are going to be square roots. So I'm going to simplify first, and then I'm going to rationalize my denominator. I'm going to make this be the square root of 25y squared over the square root of x squared times x. So now I can take perfect squares out, so I know my numerator is 5y over x times the square root of x. Okay, I don't want to have that square root of x in the denominator, so I'm going to get rid of it by multiplying by square root of x over square root of x. When I do this, I end up with, in the numerator, 5y times the square root of x, right? I can't do anything more to that. In the denominator, I'm going to have x times, now I have the square root of x times x underneath the root there, right? So the square root of anything squared, though, is just that thing. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't see. Sorry. The square root of anything squared is just that thing. And so what I'm going to end up with here is 5y times the square root of x all over x times x, which is going to be x squared, right? I said x times the square root of x times the square root of x equals x times x. Okay, and I cannot simplify that any further. All right, 27 over the square root of x, I'm going to multiply that by the square root of x over the square root of x. So realize that I'm kind of doing two things in one. I'm making this the square root of 27 over the square root of x, and I'm going to multiply it by the square root of x over the square root of x. So I have the square root of 27x in the numerator, all over the square root of x times the square root of x, which is just x. But I know the square root of 27 is really 9 times, 27 is 9 times 3, so it's the square root of 9 times 3 times x. This is all over regular x. So I'm going to pull out a 3. The perfect square that I see there is 9. So I'm going to have 3 times the square root of 3x, and it's all over x. Since this x is under a radical and this x is not, I cannot simplify them. Okay, but that's my answer there. And here, sorry, I'm going to take the square root of, I'm going to make that look like 9 times 3 times x squared times x, and I'm going to put it all over the square root of 4 times 2 times y. Okay, I pulled out perfect squares is all I did. 9 times 3 is 27, and x squared times x is x cubed. And then in the denominator, 4 times 2 is 8. So when I pull this perfect squares out, I'm going to have 3 times x times the square root of 3x all over 2 times the square root of 2y, right? But I don't want to have any square roots in my denominator, so I'm going to undo that by multiplying the square root of 2y over the square root of 2y. I'm allowed to do that because I'm really just multiplying by 1. I'm not changing the amount, right? Okay, in my numerator, we just multiply everything straight across. So I have 3x times the square root of, I'm going to multiply all this stuff together and put it under the house. 3 times 2 is 6 times x times y. That's my new numerator. My denominator is 2 times the square root of 2y times the square root of 2y. Well, square root of 2y times square root of 2y is 2y, right? So it's going to be 2 times 2y. And so when I rewrite that, will I have room? It's going to be, sorry, I'm going to write it over here, 3x times the square root of 6xy all over 4y. And I can't simplify any more than that because the xy, the y that's in this radical, is different from the y that is out of the radical, and they can't be simplified. Okay, thanks for watching the remaining questions on that study guide.